6 years ago, a toddler vanished from his own front yard without a trace. But what happened next would shock an entire town when a stranger returned with a confession no one could have imagined. Stay with us as we unravel this unforgettable story of loss, hope, and the fight for justice. The sun shone warmly on the quiet suburban street, birds chirping softly as a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves. It was just another ordinary afternoon in the Miller family's peaceful neighborhood, a place where children played freely and neighbors greeted each other with familiarity and trust. Sarah Miller stood by the garden, carefully watering her bright blooms, glancing over every so often to keep an eye on her 2-year-old son, Max, who was playing in the front yard. Max was full of life, curious, adventurous, and fearless for a toddler. He toddled around, picking up small stones, chasing butterflies, his laughter ringing like music in the warm air. Then, just like that, in the blink of an eye, Max vanished. Sarah had turned her back for just a moment to fetch the watering can from the porch. When she looked back, the space where Max had been playing was empty. Panic swept over her instantly. She called his name, louder and louder, but there was no reply. The neighbors heard her cries and rushed outside, their faces suddenly clouded with worry. What was supposed to be a carefree afternoon had turned into a nightmare. Max's disappearance was immediate, baffling, and inexplicable. There was no sign of him, no footprints leading away, no suspicious figures seen nearby. The Miller home was a fortress of normalcy, in a neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Yet here was the unthinkable, a toddler, gone without a trace. Within minutes, the quiet street was transformed into a scene of chaos. Police cars screeched to a halt, flashing their red and blue lights. Officers quickly canvassed the area, speaking urgently with neighbors, while a helicopter hovered overhead, scanning the neighborhood. The media arrived shortly after, eager to capture every moment of the unfolding tragedy. Sarah, shattered and trembling, refused to leave the scene. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest as she called out to her son again and again. "How could this happen?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Where are you, Max? Please come back." Mark, her husband, arrived home from work to find his wife distraught and the streets swarming with police. He wrapped his arms around Sarah, but the crushing weight of the unknown pressed down on both of them. Their son, their whole world, had vanished from their front yard. The police began a thorough search, checking nearby parks, alleys, and streets. But as hours turned into days, hope began to dim. The community held vigils, plastered posters everywhere with Max's smiling face, and called on everyone to be vigilant. Still, the question lingered like a dark cloud. How could a toddler disappear so completely in broad daylight? Sarah refused to give up. Despite the anguish and helplessness, a fierce determination took root inside her. Max was out there somewhere, and she would find him. But as the sun set that first day, the terrifying reality set in. A nightmare had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The following morning, the police launched a full-scale investigation. Detectives arrived with clipboards and cameras, interviewing neighbors and collecting statements. Surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses was reviewed, but frustratingly, no clear clues emerged. The footage showed the quiet street and children playing, but there was no sign of Max or anyone suspicious. Rumors began to swirl through the town. Some whispered about a stranger lurking nearby. Others suggested an accident or even a deliberate abduction. The police kept their findings close, but the community's anxiety grew with every passing day. The sense of safety had been shattered overnight. Sarah and Mark spent hours at the police station, answering questions and pleading for any information. They handed out flyers at grocery stores, schools, and bus stops. The media coverage intensified, bringing unwelcome attention and mixed feelings. While the publicity helped keep Max's story alive, it also exposed the family to harsh scrutiny and endless speculation. Detective Harris, the lead investigator, was determined yet frustrated. He had handled missing person cases before, but none as confounding as this. Without witnesses or concrete leads, the case stalled. The absence of even the smallest piece of evidence made the search feel hopeless at times. Despite the slow progress, Sarah remained steadfast. She organized neighborhood searches, spoke at town meetings, and connected with other parents who had faced similar tragedies. Her maternal instinct, fueled by love and desperation, kept her moving forward, even when her spirit felt broken. Mark, meanwhile, struggled with his own despair but became Sarah's anchor. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, united by their shared pain and determination. Their home, once filled with laughter, became a shrine to Max's memory, with pictures and toys preserved exactly as he left them. The town began to change, too. The once close-knit community was now marked by suspicion and fear. Parents kept their children indoors, and strangers were eyed with distrust. But amid the darkness, the community's compassion also shone through. Neighbors volunteered to help with searches, local businesses donated resources, and churches held prayer vigils. Still, the question remained unanswered. Where was Max? As days bled into weeks, the pain of not knowing gnawed at Sarah's heart. She clung to one unwavering hope, that somehow her son was alive and that she would bring him home. The investigation was just beginning, but already the story of a toddler who vanished from his own front yard had gripped a community and would soon change many lives forever. As the months slipped into years, the bright hope that once lit Sarah and Mark's hearts began to flicker under the weight of silence. The police files on Max's disappearance grew thick with unanswered questions, and each cold lead chipped away at the fragile optimism they clung to. Yet, in their home, hope refused to die. Every morning, Sarah would look at Max's favorite blanket, still folded neatly on his bed, and whisper promises she never intended to break. Mark kept the news stories saved in a battered scrapbook, each headline a painful reminder that Max's story was still alive in the world, even if he wasn't. Despite the pain, Sarah and Mark became fierce advocates for missing children. They connected with support groups, found strength in others who knew the ache of unanswered questions, and worked tirelessly to keep Max's story from fading into obscurity. They organized fundraisers to help search efforts and pushed local authorities to keep the case open. Every face in the crowd, every flyer posted at grocery stores and gas stations, every prayer whispered in the dark was a thread woven into the tapestry of their relentless hope. The media continued to cover Max's disappearance sporadically, sometimes renewing public interest, sometimes letting the story fade into the background. Sarah and Mark endured painful interviews, each one opening old wounds, but also giving them a platform to appeal for information. Their lives became a blend of normal routines and the constant, gnawing presence of loss. Friends drifted away, unable to face the pain, while others stood by them with quiet solidarity. Their home became a shrine to Max's memory. Photos lined the walls, his toys untouched, his room a perfect snapshot frozen in time. Nights were the hardest. Sarah would lie awake, replaying every moment of that fateful day, wondering if she could have done something differently, haunted by the what-ifs that no parent should ever face. Yet, beneath the sorrow, a stubborn flame burned. She refused to accept that Max was gone forever. Mark, too, wrestled with despair and hope. He threw himself into work during the day but spent countless nights researching, talking to investigators, and hunting for any clue that might have been overlooked. He feared that time was slipping away from them, but he never let that fear extinguish his determination. The community, too, remained divided between fear and compassion. Some tried to forget, hoping to move on, while others, inspired by Sarah and Mark's courage, formed volunteer patrols and awareness campaigns. The neighborhood was changed forever. Where children once played freely, parents now watched closely, shadows of fear lurking behind smiles. But then, just as the ache of silence seemed unbearable, something unexpected stirred in the quiet town. A stranger arrived, an outsider who brought with him whispers of the past and a mysterious connection to Max's disappearance. The fragile threads of hope Sarah and Mark had spun were about to be tested once more, in ways they could never have imagined. 6 years had passed since Max disappeared from the front yard, and life had settled into a tense, uneasy rhythm for the Millers and their community. It was then that a stranger arrived, a man who seemed out of place in the quiet suburb. He appeared unremarkable at first glance, mid-30s, average height, dark eyes that flickered with something unreadable. But there was an edge to him, something unsettling. He walked with purpose but kept to himself, avoiding eye contact and conversation. The neighbors noticed him quickly. Rumors began to circulate. Who was he? Why had he come here after all this time? Some whispered that he was a private investigator. Others thought he might be connected to the police. But no one knew for sure. Sarah watched from a distance, her heart pounding whenever she caught sight of the stranger near their street. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. Her instincts screamed that this man might hold answers, or perhaps new dangers. Days turned to weeks, and the stranger's presence became a quiet tension in the neighborhood. He visited local shops, asked few questions, but seemed to gather information discreetly. Sarah's curiosity wrestled with fear. Could this stranger be the key to finding Max, or was he another shadow slipping through their lives? Then, one evening, as dusk settled over the town and the streets were bathed in golden light, the stranger knocked on the miller's front door. Sarah opened it cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. The man looked at her with a strange intensity and spoke softly but firmly. "I know what happened to your son." His words hung heavy in the air. Sarah's heart raced, her mind flooded with 1,000 questions. Who was he? How could he possibly know? Was this a cruel trick or the breakthrough they had been waiting for? The stranger's confession was unlike anything Sarah had imagined. He told a bizarre story. Max hadn't simply vanished. He claimed that Max had been taken by a secretive group with dark motives, that he was alive, but living a life altered by forces beyond Sarah's understanding. The story sounded surreal, almost unbelievable. Yet, the pain in the man's eyes and the details he shared stirred something deep inside Sarah, a mixture of hope and dread. Mark joined Sarah as she listened to the stranger's words. Together, they faced a new mystery that threatened to pull them into a hidden world of secrets and shadows. The small town they thought they knew was not what it seemed, and the fight to bring Max home was far from over. The stranger's confession cracked open a door into a darkness that had been carefully concealed for years. Sarah and Mark would have to navigate a dangerous path, trusting a man whose past was as mysterious as the story he told. The journey ahead was uncertain, but their love for Max gave them the courage to step into the unknown. The stranger's voice was low but steady as he sat across from Sarah and Mark in their dimly lit living room. The evening light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows over the worn furniture. His eyes, dark and haunted, held theirs captive as he began to unravel the story that had been locked inside him for years. "I never meant to come forward like this," he admitted, his hands trembling slightly. "But I couldn't live with the secret any longer." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Max didn't just disappear. He was taken by a group, a covert organization that operates in the shadows, using children for their own twisted purposes. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. Mark's jaw clenched, disbelief and anger flashing across his face. The stranger's words sounded like something out of a nightmare or a conspiracy theory. Yet, something in his tone made them listen. "I was involved, but not as a kidnapper," the man said quickly, sensing their rising suspicion. "I was one of the people who stumbled onto the truth. I was working undercover, trying to expose them." He explained that the group had been abducting children with special qualities, children who could be manipulated or used in experiments no one would ever admit to publicly. The stranger revealed that Max was taken because he had a rare genetic trait, a detail only a few knew, including his own parents. This trait made Max a target for the group's sinister plans. According to the man, the group kept Max hidden in a remote facility, and though they had been careful to avoid detection, their secrecy had finally been compromised. "I found out about Max when I infiltrated their operation," the stranger said. "But I couldn't rescue him then. I had to get out, gather evidence, and come to you." His voice cracked with guilt and urgency. "I'm the reason you didn't hear anything sooner. I had to stay silent to protect him and myself." Sarah's mind raced. The man's confession was terrifying and unbelievable all at once. Yet, the vividness of his details, the haunted look in his eyes, and the sincerity in his voice made it impossible to dismiss him as a fraud. Mark rose from his chair, pacing nervously. "If what you say is true, why come to us now? Why risk everything after all this time?" The stranger looked down. "Because they're planning something soon. I intercepted messages. Max's life is in danger. You deserve to know the truth before it's too late." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling like a heavy fog. Sarah fought back tears, torn between hope and despair. Could this man be their last chance to find Max? Or was this the cruelest deception yet? Despite their shock, Sarah and Mark knew they couldn't ignore the stranger's confession. But trust did not come easily. 6 years of heartache had taught them to guard their hearts carefully. They asked questions, pressing for every detail about the group, the facility, and the risks involved. The stranger answered as honestly as he could, sharing what little he knew and promising to help them navigate the dangers ahead. "We have to be careful," he warned. "They're watching, listening. If they suspect we're onto them, they'll disappear Max for good, or worse." Sarah felt a surge of determination that no fear could quell. "Tell us what we need to do." The stranger unfolded a plan, dangerous, complicated, but their only hope. They would need to gather evidence, locate the hidden facility, and find a way to extract Max safely. It meant working undercover, taking risks they had never imagined. They would have to rely on the stranger's knowledge and his contacts within the shadows. Mark was skeptical, but willing. "How do we know you're telling the truth? How do we know this isn't some cruel game?" The man met Mark's gaze steadily. "I don't expect you to trust me yet. But the moment we find Max, you'll know. I'm not here to hurt your family. I'm here to save it." Sarah looked at her husband, then back at the stranger. The decision was terrifying but clear. They had to act. The years of waiting, the nights of praying and hoping, had led to this moment. If Max was alive, they owed him everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. The stranger introduced them to contacts, former insiders, hackers, and whistleblowers, people who had their own reasons for fighting the group's shadowy power. Sarah and Mark learned to operate in secrecy, mastering surveillance and coded communication. Every step brought new dangers, but also renewed hope. The Miller family's world had shifted into a new reality, a world where courage, trust, and love were their weapons. They were no longer just victims. They were warriors fighting for the son they had lost. As they prepared to embark on the most dangerous journey of their lives, Sarah whispered a silent vow to Max. "Hold on, my boy. We're coming for you." The night was cloaked in silence as Sarah, Mark, and the stranger, who finally revealed his name as Ethan, prepared for their first move into the unknown. Their mission was clear but perilous: to infiltrate the shadowy organization that had taken Max and uncover the secrets hidden deep within its web. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on them, but so did the fierce determination to bring Max home. Ethan led them to a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of town, a former safe house for his covert contacts. Inside, the walls were lined with maps, files, and encrypted computers. The flickering glow of screens illuminated their faces, revealing the lines of worry and resolve etched deeply into their skin. "We don't know the exact location of the facility yet," Ethan explained, "but we have intercepted communications pointing to a remote compound in the mountains. It's heavily guarded, and the terrain is unforgiving. We'll need to be smart and cautious." Mark studied the maps with a growing sense of dread. The compound was isolated, surrounded by thick forest and steep cliffs. Any wrong move could mean the end, not just of their mission, but of their lives. Yet, the thought of Max trapped somewhere inside that fortress fueled their courage. Over the next several days, the trio gathered information, hacking into encrypted channels and speaking with contacts who had escaped the group's grasp. The more they learned, the darker the picture became. The organization was ruthless, with deep resources and a network that spanned continents. Children like Max were not only kidnapped, but subjected to experiments designed to manipulate their rare abilities no one outside the group understood. Sarah felt her resolve harden. She had to believe Max was alive and strong, waiting for them to rescue him. She imagined his small face, the way his eyes lit up when he smiled, and it steeled her nerves. "Ethan, what's the plan for getting in?" Mark asked, his voice low. "We'll scout the perimeter first," Ethan said. "We'll need disguises and stealth. No alarms, no confrontations. If we raise suspicion, they'll move Max or worse." The night before their infiltration, Sarah barely slept. Memories of the day Max vanished flooded her mind. She pictured him playing innocently in the yard, so full of life. The image was a sharp contrast to the grim mission ahead. When the dawn broke, they set out in silence. The forest swallowed their footsteps, the air thick with tension. Every rustle, every shadow was a possible threat. But they moved with purpose, guided by Ethan's experience and their desperate hope. As they neared the compound, their hearts pounded. Tall fences topped with razor wire, watchtowers with spotlights, and armed guards patrolled the grounds. The place was a fortress, designed to keep secrets and prisoners alike. Ethan signaled them to hide behind dense brush as a patrol passed. The risk was enormous. But failure was not an option. They were close to Max. Every step forward was a step closer to uncovering the truth and, hopefully, reuniting their family. Days of careful surveillance passed. Sarah and Mark watched the compound's routines, the shift changes, the supply deliveries, and the moments when guards relaxed their vigilance. They documented everything, knowing their window of opportunity was limited. Then, on a gray afternoon shrouded by thick clouds, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Through a narrow gap in the fence, she caught sight of a figure, a boy. Her breath hitched. It was Max. He looked older, of course, his face etched with years of hardship. But there was no mistaking those eyes, the same deep brown that had once sparkled with joy in their own backyard. Max was alive. Mark grabbed Sarah's arm, his voice trembling. "Is that really him?" "Yes," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "That's our boy." Ethan nodded grimly. "He's being watched constantly. We have to be extremely careful if we want to get close." The sight of Max renewed their strength, but also their fear. What condition was he in? What had he endured all these years? The stranger's story suddenly became painfully real. Over the next days, they observed Max's movements. He was rarely alone, always under the watchful eyes of guards and staff. But there were fleeting moments when he seemed to slip away from supervision, a chance they might seize. Sarah and Mark devised a risky plan to approach him during one of these brief windows. They would have to bypass security, distract the guards, and reach Max without alerting the entire compound. The plan was dangerous, but the alternative, doing nothing, was unthinkable. The thought of Max locked away, isolated and vulnerable, spurred them forward. As night fell, they prepared for their attempt. Hearts pounding, breath shallow, they moved through the shadows with one goal: to reach Max and bring him home. The rescue had begun. The night was pitch black, the moon hidden behind thick clouds as Sarah, Mark, and Ethan moved silently through the underbrush near the compound. Every breath felt heavy, each step measured with painstaking care. The entire mission hinged on these moments. One wrong move, and all hope could be lost. Ethan led the way, his knowledge of the compound's layout guiding them through the dense forest that surrounded the fortress-like structure. They approached a weak point in the fence, an old service gate hidden by overgrown vines. The rusty lock was a minor obstacle compared to the watchful eyes they'd face once inside. Mark's hands shook as he carefully cut the lock with wire cutters Ethan had supplied. The sound was faint but felt like a thunderclap in the stillness of the night. Once the gate creaked open, they slipped inside, hearts pounding in unison. Inside, the compound was a maze of buildings and corridors, illuminated sporadically by harsh floodlights. Shadows stretched long and menacing. Ethan pointed to a small building near the center where Max had been seen during their observations. It was heavily guarded, but there was a narrow window during a scheduled guard rotation. Sarah's throat tightened. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. She could almost hear Max's heartbeat, feel his presence close enough to touch. The trio moved with extreme caution, hiding behind crates and machinery whenever a guard passed. Every sound, the distant bark of a dog, the crunch of gravel underfoot, made them freeze in place. The tension was unbearable. Finally, they reached the building. Ethan whispered, "Inside there. That's where Max is kept during the night." Sarah swallowed her fear. "How do we get him out?" Ethan pulled a small device from his pocket. "This will disable the alarms temporarily, just long enough for us to get in and out. But we have to be fast." Mark glanced nervously at the windows. He could see a faint outline of a boy inside. Thin, tired, but unmistakably Max. Their son was real, right there, after all these years. They picked the lock on the door, moving as quietly as possible. Inside, the air was cold and sterile. Max was sitting on a cot, staring blankly ahead. He flinched when the door creaked. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. "Mom? Dad?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Sarah rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "Max, it's us. We're here." He hesitated, then threw himself into her arms, trembling. The reunion was bittersweet. joy mixed with sorrow for the years lost. "We have to move quickly," Ethan urged. "The alarm disable won't last long." With Max clutching Sarah tightly, they retraced their steps, hearts pounding. As they neared the exit, a sudden shout echoed through the compound. A guard had spotted them. "Run!" Ethan shouted. Chaos erupted. Lights blazed on, and guards poured out, weapons drawn. The trio sprinted toward the gate, dodging bullets and obstacles. Sarah's lungs burned, but she refused to let go of Max. They burst through the service gate just as the alarm device failed. Sirens wailed behind them. "Keep going," Ethan yelled. They plunged into the forest, guided by moonlight and desperation. Branches whipped their faces, roots threatened to trip them, but the thought of freedom drove them onward. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing where a car waited. Ethan's contact had arranged for a quick escape. They piled in, breathless and battered but alive. Max looked up at his parents, his voice trembling with hope. "Are we really going home?" "Yes, Max," Sarah whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We're going home." Back in the safety of their home, Sarah and Mark finally allowed themselves to breathe. The nightmare of Max's disappearance had ended, but the journey toward healing was just beginning. Max was physically weak and emotionally fragile, haunted by memories he barely understood and fears that lingered in his eyes. The family embraced, holding tightly as if to never let go again. But the scars left by 6 years of captivity ran deep. Max was distant at times, struggling to connect, and the silence in his eyes was a constant reminder of all he had endured. Doctors and therapists soon joined their circle, working with Max patiently. He had lost precious time to grow, to learn, to be a child without fear. The medical professionals focused on rebuilding his health, while counselors helped him navigate the emotional maze of trauma. Sarah stayed by Max's side every step of the way, her unwavering love his anchor. Mark was the family's protector, fiercely committed to giving Max the normal life he deserved. Ethan remained close, a trusted ally who had risked everything to reunite the family. Despite the challenges, small victories began to emerge. Max smiled faintly at a joke. He reached out to hold Sarah's hand. He asked questions about the world outside the compound. Each step forward was a triumph. Sarah often found herself looking out the window, reflecting on the improbable journey that had brought Max back. She thought of the stranger who had walked into their lives with a bizarre confession, and how trust had blossomed amid fear. The community rallied around them, offering support and love. Neighbors organized gatherings, friends brought meals, and local news spread the story of Max's miraculous return. The Millers were no longer just victims, they were symbols of hope. In the quiet moments, Sarah and Mark dreamed of the future. Max playing in the yard again, laughter filling the house, and wounds slowly fading into memories. They knew the road ahead was long and uncertain, but they had each other, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Max looked up at his parents and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion. "We will always find you, Max. Always." Their family was whole again. The past's darkness had been confronted and overcome. And in that light, a new beginning had blossomed, one filled with love, resilience, and the promise of brighter days ahead. As Max slowly settled back into life with Sarah and Mark, shadows of the past lingered heavily. Though he was home, the mysterious years spent in captivity continued to haunt him, and the family knew that understanding what truly happened was essential, not only for Max's healing, but to ensure no other child suffered the same fate. One afternoon, Ethan arrived with a bundle of files he had painstakingly collected during their covert investigation. He laid the documents on the kitchen table, each marked with cryptic codes and images of the organization that had held Max. "This is everything we've uncovered so far," Ethan said grimly. "Their operation is vast and more sinister than we imagined." Sarah flipped through the pages, her heart pounding as she saw photos of other missing children, some faces worn by time and pain, others hauntingly fresh. The organization wasn't just kidnapping children. They were experimenting on them, trying to harness powers no one else understood. Mark clenched his fists. How could anyone do this to innocent kids? Ethan sighed. They believe they're creating something greater, children with abilities enhanced beyond normal human limits. But the cost is unimaginable suffering. Max sat quietly nearby, absorbing the revelations with a heavy silence. For the first time, he spoke about what he had endured: the cold, sterile rooms, the strangers in white coats, the injections, the loneliness. His voice trembled, but sharing these memories lifted a burden he had carried alone for years. The family rallied together, drawing strength from each other's presence. They knew exposing the organization's secrets was the only way to stop them. Sarah vowed, "We'll do whatever it takes. Max's story won't be silenced." Ethan reached out. "There's more. We've traced several operatives to a central command facility across the country. If we can get inside, we might uncover evidence to bring the whole network down." Mark's eyes burned with determination. "Then that's where we go next. We end this, for Max and for every child still trapped." Plans were made swiftly but carefully. Sarah, Mark, Ethan, and Max prepared to travel to the distant command center, a heavily fortified complex hidden deep within a mountain range. The risks were staggering, but their resolve was unshakable. Max, though fragile, insisted on coming along. "I want to face it," he said softly. "I want to help stop this." Sarah smiled through tears, proud of her son's bravery. "We'll face it together." The journey was grueling. They moved through treacherous terrain, relying on Ethan's expertise to avoid detection. Each night around the campfire, the weight of their mission hung thick in the air. Max grew stronger with every mile, but the scars of the past remained. As they approached the compound, the group studied satellite images and security patterns. The place was a fortress: barbed wire fences, armed patrols, surveillance cameras everywhere. Getting in would require precision and stealth. Ethan devised a plan to infiltrate during a scheduled power outage, the one brief moment when security systems would be vulnerable. The timing was tight. Any delay would mean disaster. On the night of the operation, nerves ran high. They slipped through the shadows, hearts pounding with every step. The cold mountain air bit at their skin, but adrenaline pushed them onward. Inside the compound, the atmosphere was tense. They moved quickly through corridors lined with heavy doors and surveillance devices. They uncovered files, photographs, and evidence of experiments that chilled them to the bone. But the greatest shock came when they found a secret wing, a hidden chamber where children, including Max, had been held. Names and records filled the walls, revealing the depth of the operation. Max stared at the records, his voice shaking. This was my life." Sarah hugged him tightly. "It's over now. We'll make sure no one else suffers." As they gathered evidence, alarms suddenly blared. Their presence was discovered. "Run!" Ethan shouted. With documents in hand, they fled through the labyrinthine corridors, dodging guards and obstacles. The stakes had never been higher. Failure meant capture, or worse. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that what they carried could dismantle the entire network. The shrill alarm shattered the silence like a gunshot, echoing throughout the cold, sterile hallways of the compound. Sarah's heart slammed in her chest as she clutched the thick folder filled with incriminating documents. Mark's grip on Max's hand was firm, but his eyes darted anxiously, searching for the safest route out. "Move now," Ethan hissed, pulling them toward the nearest stairwell. The pounding footsteps of guards grew louder behind them, a menacing reminder that they were far from safe. The narrow stairwell was dimly lit and cramped, forcing them to squeeze past each other in hurried desperation. The weight of the evidence Sarah held felt heavier than ever. It was the key to ending this nightmare, yet it could also be the cause of their downfall if lost. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a maze of tunnels, remnants of old maintenance pathways beneath the mountain. Ethan took the lead, guiding them through the twists and turns with practiced ease. Every moment was a battle against time. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind them. A guard's voice shouted, "They're escaping through the lower levels." Panic surged through their veins, but retreat was not an option. As they ran, Max stumbled, his small foot catching on a jagged stone. He fell hard, scraping his knee, but Sarah was instantly there, pulling him up. "You're okay," she whispered, wiping the tears from his cheek. Ethan glanced back. "We don't have much time. Keep moving." They emerged into a cavernous underground chamber, the air stale and heavy. Ahead, a narrow passage led to an emergency exit marked with a faded green sign. The light flickered ominously, but it was their only way out. Mark kicked open the door, and cold night air rushed in. Outside, The mountain loomed under a blanket of stars, indifferent to the chaos below. The escape route led to a steep cliffside trail, dangerous but their best shot at freedom. The group sprinted up the rocky path, branches scraping their faces and loose stones threatening their footing. The sound of pursuit grew faint behind them, a hopeful sign. Finally, they reached the forest's edge where a waiting vehicle, courtesy of Ethan's contacts, was parked in the shadows. They piled inside, hearts racing but spirits soaring. As the car sped away, Sarah exhaled deeply. We did it. We really did it. Max looked out the window, eyes wide but shining with newfound hope. No more running, he whispered. Mark reached over and squeezed his shoulder. No more running. This ends now. Returning home with undeniable proof of the organization's horrific deeds sparked a wave of action. Sarah, Mark, and Ethan immediately handed over the evidence to law enforcement and trusted journalists, determined to expose the truth to the world. The media frenzy that followed was intense. Headlines screamed of the secret child trafficking ring, and public outrage grew. The government launched a full-scale investigation, shutting down multiple facilities linked to the network. Arrests were made, and survivors were rescued from similar fates. Max's story became a symbol of hope and resilience for countless families who had lost loved ones. Though the legal battles and media storm were exhausting, Sarah and Mark found solace in knowing that their nightmare had helped bring justice and save others. Max was slowly rebuilding his life, surrounded by a community that embraced him with open arms. Counseling sessions continued, and Max began to express himself through art and writing, finding ways to process his trauma. His laughter, once rare and fragile, grew more frequent, lighting up the household like a beacon of healing. One quiet evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Sarah looked around at the faces she loved most. We fought through darkness and pain, she said softly. But together, we found light. Max smiled, eyes shining with gratitude and strength. Thank you for never giving up on me. Mark nodded. We'll always be your family. Always. Their journey had been harrowing and painful, but it ended with hope and new beginnings. The scars would remain, but so would the unbreakable bond that had carried them through. And in that bond, they found the courage to face the future, together, stronger than ever. Months had passed since the dramatic takedown of the child trafficking ring that had haunted Max's life for so long. Life was beginning to settle into a new rhythm for Sarah, Mark, and most importantly, Max. Though the trauma of the past still cast long shadows over their days, a sense of healing and hope was slowly taking root. Max, once a frightened and withdrawn boy, was beginning to rediscover the light in the world and in himself. Max had enrolled in a specialized school designed for children who had experienced severe trauma. At first, he struggled to connect, burdened by the memories he couldn't easily share. But slowly, through patient teachers and caring peers, he began to open up. He found a voice not just in speech but in art, channeling his emotions onto canvas. His paintings had evolved from dark, chaotic swirls to vibrant images of sunrise and nature, symbols of renewal and hope. Sarah and Mark attended every counseling session with Max, standing firm as his advocates and protectors. They connected with other families who had faced similar horrors, building a community of support and understanding. The neighborhood that once felt like a place of loss transformed into a sanctuary of safety and love. One bright spring afternoon, the family gathered in their backyard, the very yard where Max had disappeared 6 years ago. But now it was different. The garden bloomed with flowers of every color, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and life. Max ran freely across the lawn, his smile radiant and genuine, a stark contrast to the frightened child who had vanished. Sarah watched him closely, tears of gratitude spilling down her cheeks. "We've come so far," she whispered to Mark, her voice thick with emotion. Mark nodded, eyes glistening with pride and relief. "He's our miracle." Max approached them, holding a small sapling carefully planted in a handmade pot. "This is for new beginnings," he said quietly. "For me, for us." The family embraced tightly, their bond forged stronger through pain and perseverance. Though the past would always be a part of their story, it no longer defined their future. They had reclaimed their lives and their hope. In that moment, under the vast blue sky, the promise of healing felt real and unbreakable. Together, they faced forward, ready to embrace whatever came next with courage and love. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and pink, Sarah, Mark, and Max sat together on the porch of their home. The cool evening breeze gently rustled the leaves around them, a peaceful contrast to the turbulent journey they had endured. For the first time in many years, there was a calmness in their hearts and a quiet confidence in their souls. Max, now a little older and infinitely stronger, looked up at his parents with a steady, determined gaze. "I want to help others," he said softly. "No child should ever go through what I did. No one should be lost or forgotten." Sarah smiled warmly, her heart swelling with pride. "Your story has already inspired so many people, Max, and it will keep inspiring more." Mark reached over and squeezed Max's hand gently. "Whatever you want to do, we'll be right here, supporting you every step of the way." That evening, the family began discussing plans for the future, plans that would turn their pain into purpose. They decided to establish a foundation dedicated to helping survivors of child trafficking and abuse. The organization would provide counseling, education, safe housing, and hope to those who needed it most. Their mission was clear: to bring light into the darkest corners, to fight for justice, and to prevent other families from suffering as they had. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but the strength they had found in each other made them ready for the challenge. As the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, Max whispered with quiet conviction, "This is just the beginning." Sarah and Mark held his hands tightly, their voices united in hope. "Yes, it is, and we will walk this path together." Their story, one marked by unimaginable loss, unyielding resilience, and ultimate triumph, stood as a powerful testament to the strength of family and the human spirit. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, hope can shine brighter than ever, guiding those who dare to believe in new beginnings. The journey wasn't over, but they had already won the most important battle, reclaiming their lives and their futures together. Max's journey from a frightened, lost child to a courageous young boy determined to change the world reminds us all of the incredible power of hope, love, and resilience. Through the darkest of times, his family never gave up, and together they turned pain into purpose, proving that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, light can break through and lead the way to healing and new beginnings. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional and inspiring journey. If Max's story moved you and reminded you of the strength we all carry inside, please give this video a thumbs up. Your support means the world and helps us share more powerful stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story that touches the heart and uplifts the soul. Together, let's spread hope, courage, and kindness in every corner of the world. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and keep believing in the power of hope.